Only way to start your day.
8 minutes after 8. Well done. We did 7 after 7. Now we're doing 8 after 8. Let's see if we can get it on 9 after 9. But okay, let's see what happens as we go through today. It is Tuesday, and we're getting into the third hour of Kenya's biggest conversation. Our guest for this hour is already in the hot seat, and it's a hot issue that we'll look at as we get into those matters this morning. Let me remind you about what's happening on the 31st of August, especially now that we're getting into university admission season and everybody's looking for that higher education. Sometimes you want to go out of the country, is it not? Yes. And you want to be able to say, okay, where do I go? Which school do I go to? This is the degree that I intend to pursue. Which is the best institution for me to go to? What can I afford? Who should I speak to? So many questions buzzing around your brain, and you're wondering, okay, what do I do? Guess what? Cradle understands a lot of these issues that you may have. Cradle says, we get it. And we know that sometimes you've been scammed. We know that sometimes you're not really sure what to do. We know that sometimes you don't know how to match what you want to do to a career, to university, to a country. So we've taken all this information and we've put it in a place whereby you can come and access, where you are sure of integrity, where you're sure of a character, of a proper process from start to finish. And we have stepped into the market to make sure that these questions can be answered, and answered in a manner to your complete satisfaction. What they've also done is that they've come up with a world study abroad fair. It takes place this Saturday on the 31st of August from 11 p.m. to 4 p.m. You can come in and meet all kinds of providers from universities from different countries, the UK, New Zealand, the US, Grenada, Cyprus, New Zealand, across board. And these universities will be on ground to talk to you. You can apply on the spot and gain admission. You can talk about your visa and accommodation. You can also talk about scholarships. So many things up for grabs from 11 to 4 p.m. on the 31st. What you need to do is register cradle.com, www.cradle.com, or call 0799 000 444, and help is right there for you. All right, getting into our conversation for this hour. The Finance Act 2023 made a comeback, or is making a comeback, or all of these things happening at the same time. And joining us this hour, already in the hot seat, is Dr. Alex Kamau, who is a business consultant. And we're looking at the Finance Act 2023, a burden or goodwill. And he's here with us. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Ndu.
How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Good to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Finance Act crept back into somehow 2023.
Yes.
We're going to look at what this all means. I tried to crack at it a little bit a couple of days ago, but let's open it up properly today and say, okay, fine. What does it actually mean? But let's welcome you properly with today's proverb, shall we?
Wonderful.
All right.
Proverbs for the whole of this week come from the People's Republic of Algeria. There is an excess of familiarity at the root of all hostility.
What do you think?
There is an excess of familiarity
At the root of all hostility.
at the root of all hostility. I think it talks about that we need to keep our friends close, but our enemies closer. Because the people that inflict the biggest harm and pain to anyone are the people closest to you. So there's a familiarity breeds contempt.
Yes, so they tell us.
So they say.
Yeah.
So basically, I say if you are not close to me, then chances of you hurting me are very minimal, and therefore we should be keen about the people who we keep close to us, our inner circles.
Indeed. Okay, well, I guess that interpretation makes sense, and looking at conversations that we'll have. Finance Act 2023, not even through the back door.
Yes.
The front door is flung wide open, and it's walking in boldly and
Yes.
slapping everybody in the face.
Yes.
And we're asking the question, okay, so what exactly does that mean? People were not yet rejoicing when it was, shut down by the courts.
Yes.
And said, okay, that means we're not going to have to pay for a couple of these things. We're not going to have to pay these deductions towards the housing levy. We're not going to have to do 1, 2, 3. Maybe fuel will go back to 8% VAT. And then no sooner had that happened, the higher court said, no, we're going back. So what is an overview of what all this means?
Thank you very much, Ndu. What that means is that actually nothing changes. Because in the first instance, even after the High Court had quashed the implementation of Finance Act 2023, we had not seen the government implementing the proposed new changes. The fuel was still selling at 18% VAT, 16% VAT. And the salaries were the people earning the high tax, high salary bands from 800,000 and above per month were still subjected to that 5% pay as you earn.
Yes.
So nothing had changed. So I would say something had changed if by the time the High Court had quashed the implementation of Finance Act 2023, the government had acted to implement the new changes. Then after now, the Supreme Court came to suspend the implementation of the Finance Act, of implementation of the ruling by the High Court. Then we would have said something has changed, but nothing has changed. And it was not supposed to change from the word go, because the moment the Court of Appeal said that it has seen in its wisdom to drop the implementation of Finance Act 2023, that very day or the day after, we had the National Assembly, Majority Leader, Kimani Ichung'wah, saying that that was as a result of judicial activism, and there's no way Finance Act 2023 will be thrown out of the doors. So nothing was supposed to change from the word go.
So we're saying the leader of the majority has the powers and the means to disregard a court order.
That's actually the $1 million question, but he's in record saying that that declaration by the Court of Appeal about throwing the Finance Act 2023 will not carry the day. And we have seen the Supreme Court has suspended the implementation of that court ruling. So I feel we will go back to where we were. Finance Act 2023 will be implemented in full.
Okay. But don't you think that was out of frustrations? Because Kimani Ichung'wah made a context to what he was saying. So it was out of the frustrations, a government that cannot function entirely. Because once the Finance Act 2024 was rejected, or let me say bill,
yes,
because it was in the assented to,
yes, then
obviously the fallback plan was 2023. So 2023 again is challenged, which had been fully implemented, by the way. 2022, 2023 had been fully implemented. But it's again thrown out, and you're told you cannot even use the former framework to collect taxes. So out of frustrations, do you think it was out of frustrations more than out of the power of being a majority leader in the National Assembly?
That's for sure. It was out of frustration, but whether out of frustration or not, law should always be respected. And a person of his caliber who occupies a very senior position in this government, every word that he utters, he should realize the power that it carries. So if he's seen to oppose the judicial pronouncements, then the kind of precedence that sets is not good for the rest of the country.
I think most of my concern
Yes.
with what happened is this. We are going back to the Finance Bill 2023.
Yes.
However, the Appropriations Act
Yes.
was pegged on the Finance Bill 2024
Yes.
if it was passed.
Yes.
Tie these loose ends for me. How do you reconcile the Finance Bill 2023 and Appropriation Bill 2024? How do you tie it in?
A very good question, Ken. How you tie the two is that when the Appropriation Act was passed and was assented to by the President for 2024-2025, actually it was for the expenditure was at 3.9 trillion as per what was envisioned by the passing of if the Finance Bill 2024 would have passed. But now Finance Bill 2024 did not pass. So what happens? But the President nevertheless assented to appropriation bill 2024-2025 at 3.9 trillion.
And this usually happens before the Finance Act. They don't fall at the same time.
They don't fall at the same time, but they have it had to be signed before 30th June of this year.
Yes.
So the president signed that, even after understanding that the finance bill 2024 had not been passed, and the two needs to balance the figure at the finance bill and the figure at appropriation bill, because it is the revenue side and the expenditure side of the budget. But it was passed. But what happened is soon after it was passed, a supplementary budget was tabled in the parliament that sought to really streamline the changes that had occasioned the failure of Finance Bill 2024 to be enacted into law. So we saw supplementary budget coming to reduce the budget of the government by 177 billion Kenya shillings.
Okay, hold on.
Yes.
Just that what you've just said.
Yes.
To streamline this expenditure?
Yes, and the revenue.
To streamline the sources of this particular revenue. Can you just explain that a little bit more? Because oftentimes these terms come flying at us and we're like, okay, so what exactly does this mean?
Thank you very much. What I mean is that the expenditure was still anchored at 3.9 trillion.
Yes.
And by the time it was being prepared and the assumption was that the Finance Bill 2024 would pass. And the Finance Bill, which is actually an omnibus tax law amendment, was to bring to the country an extra or additional 346 billion Kenya shillings. That's what the government was supposed to collect more through the passing or changing of the tax laws under Finance Bill 2024. So that did not happen. So if that now did not happen, out of the 346 billion that the government was anticipating to collect from the passing of the Finance Bill 2024, two things happened. They said, we will borrow more. 346 was divided into two, 177 billion and 169 billion. If you add 177 billion and 169 billion, you get 346 billion. So we said we will borrow more 169 billion, and we will reduce our budget by 177 billion. So they wanted now to really explain or capture that income deficit, 346 billion. The finance bill is not passing.
Yes.
How do we bridge that
We
gap?
still need the money.
We still need the money.
Essentially, yeah.
So we borrow more and we cut our expenditure by 177 billion. And the 177 billion that we did reduce our expenditure, the county government share of revenue was reduced by 20 billion. And the national government was left to reduce its budget by the rest, the remainder, which is 177 minus 20 billion. So the national government reduced its expenditure by 157 billion. And the 157 billion, actually, what received the highest beating is the development expenditure. Because the development expenditure was reduced by 130 billion, and the recurrent expenditure by 27 billion, which was again vice versa. When we are talking about austerity measures, we should really cut down on recurrent expenditure, but not development expenditure. But in this case, the government did the other way around. We reduced our development budget by about 130 billion when the Finance Bill 2024 did not pass. And we are going to borrow more, 169 billion. And the worst part is that this 169 billion we are going to borrow more, now that the revenue expectations have reduced, we are going to borrow domestically.
But let me ask this question. If we say we've cut our expenditure, why then do we need to borrow?
remember, we were supposed to cut our expenditure by 346 billion, which was not possible.
Well, again, the question, why was it not possible? Let me explain to you why I asked the question.
Yes.
Every time we're told about a budget and we're told about expectations or revenue expectations from the government, yes, which finance bill explains to us how it is now, we are supposed to mop up this money. I then delve into history. How many times in the last 10 years have we actually met our revenue projections? We have actually, okay? And the oddest thing was it was during the COVID times.
That's for sure.
Yes. Now, the reason why we met it,
Yes.
several things happened. One, all these taxes that this particular government
Yes.
seemed to feel if they implemented would raise us more money. At that time, the complete opposite is what was done. Okay. And evidence has shown that even when VAT on fuel went up, the government did not raise more money through the fuel levy. If anything, it raised less. Okay. So here's my question. If it is clear that the government has put in place or had put in place methods that guaranteed would not raise the money that it was supposed to raise, one. Two, when that didn't happen, we had an alternate situation where the bill that was supposed to help raise this money was suspended. Okay? Okay. So here we are. But has anybody come out to tell us why it is all these things that the government keeps saying they need to do must be done? Can we not suspend these projects, except for the very critical one? Can we just not suspend and say for a whole year? But it's been done also. So I'm not saying something that hasn't been done. Kibaki did it. Suspend the development projects. We already have roads. You want to build new one? Stop it. People are used to bad roads. Give them a year and then promise the following year we'll build them. Okay? That's one. Two, I have never seen anywhere it is documented that the money that we supposedly have before we borrow has been insufficient for our needs. Maybe somebody can explain to me how it's documented. I have not seen it. It's the same question we raise with county governments when they tell us that this money is not enough. Yet the one they receive,
We don't know what you've done with it.
I'm not really sure that they have demonstrated conclusively that either there's a shortfall or that it has not met the needs that they have. But it's a narrative that is propagated every time. So, again, with everything that I have said, which are many things,
Yes.
why does the government feel the need to borrow domestically when they haven't demonstrated that the money that we are actually able to collect has been utilized in the manner that they have said it would? Because it hasn't been demonstrated.
And I like that question, City. But let me start by responding to the issue why we cannot stop development budget altogether. And I wish we could, because during times of crisis, desperate measures are supposed to be undertaken. And for instance, the budget for 2023-2024, we had budgeted to incur 800 billion for development expenditure. But at the end of the year, the only money that we used under development expenditure was 250 billion. 250 billion. So we don't exercise prudent financial management. We don't follow what we budget for, because 800 billion, spending 250 billion out of 800.
What happened to the 550?
What the 550 was used under recurrent expenditure.
Okay.
So what is that, like, keeping the lights on, paying salaries?
No, mandazi.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tea, mandazi.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yes.
All those things that
And
you do
then
on
just when
a
you think
daily.
it's enough, more tea, more mandazi.
Yes. So then the issue of why I don't understand the county government continue to receive money from the national government, whereas the Auditor General every other year gives or raises audit queries saying that we cannot be able, the county governments are not able to explain this sum of money.
Yes.
And recently, I think it was in yesterday's newspaper, that the county government of Nairobi has not been able to explain 1.3 billion Kenya shillings in terms of the salary payments. It paid a salary of 11 billion in the year that ended June 2024. But out of those 11 billion, 1.3 billion cannot be explained.
It was expended, but you cannot tell where it went.
It did not go through the salary and remuneration bank account.
Okay.
But don't you think then, Daktari,
Yes.
that in fact the government has actually helped solve this problem for us? Because if we targeted 800 billion for development and we only spent 250, they've told us we needed 250. Okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, because I was going to ask that. Sorry, CT. I was going to ask
please
that
go
question.
ahead,
That
yes.
when you say that only 250
Billion.
billion was spent on development in a particular year,
Yes.
maybe that's what they wanted to spend. It's not that they only had that to spend and that they pushed it and put it in some
No.
bins. Maybe that's what decided,
Did-
okay,
did
of
you
all
see-
this money that's available,
Yes.
we are going to use 250 for development so that it can show that we've done something. The rest of it, you know,
Bandu, let me ask the question. If let's say 250 billion was spent, in terms of our development record and things we wanted to do, was apart from dams which were not built but were promised, stadiums which were supposed to have been completed but were not built, and all these things that are normally promised in the budget but are never done, did Kenyans stop living and going about their business as they normally do? No, they did not.
They did not.
Okay, so this 550, that was for recurrent expenditure. What on earth were we spending 550 billion shillings on? Salaries? Okay. Auditor General, again.
Yes.
Auditor General comments on counties and we talk of billions. Auditor General comments on national government, talks of a trillion. Somehow there's a trillion. Hey, how many-
A trillion is a million.
Imagine.
It's a lot of
A
zeros.
million.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yes,
A lot of money.
And she did say she had problems tracing this thing somewhere. So, and we wanted to borrow just 170 billion or something. Now, surely, if we found this trillion, which
We don't need to borrow.
what do we need to borrow for?
Saying.
We luckily have excess money.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll
Yes.
be able to sort out all of these things that we're talking about
Yes.
without having to go anywhere looking for the extra. Okay, let's take a break because it's starting to get a little bit frustrating when we think about it. Let's take a break and cool it off a bit. We come back and we talk about it. Finance Act 2023, what does it mean that it's making its re-debut? Can you re-debut something? And then also look at, financial prudence on part of governance.
Yes.
And say, what really needs to be done from a government business point of view. What needs to happen? We'll come back and we'll discuss that. Dr. Alex Kamau, business consultant, is our guest this hour. And we're looking at the elements that then form what would be prudent financial behavior by government. It is 29 minutes.